Digging through the remnants of the vast Imperial databases has given me a plethora of knowledge known to little, if anyone at all. All those ISB Bureau agents are either long gone or distancing themselves from this knowledge and the fear of being hunted down for it. This encrypted data disk in particular has a story worth telling, and 3 years ago when I found the first data disk, the remainder of their adventures were incomplete in the archive. But recently, and with a little bit of luck, I managed to find the second part of the data disk, revealing more about the story of 000 and BT, so let's dive in. Where we last left off, 000 and BT were stranded on the planet Tython after using their own sense of heroics to defend Dr. Aphra from Darth Vader himself. And even in the heat of their heroism, 000 and BT were both destroyed and left dismembered and useless by Darth Vader. But luckily for them, Aphra was able to recover them in time and save them from becoming artifacts from the once booming Tython. And that's where the story went dry last time. So what happened to them after? Surprisingly, after leaving Tython, Aphra remained loyal to both 000 and BT and eventually rebuilt them. In rebuilding them, she also guaranteed them a retirement in their own tropical paradise, which they obliged, and I don't think anyone would oppose that, right? Now in secret, it almost seemed as if Aphra stranded them on this retirement planet in a way to keep the droids away from her. Because as we discussed in part 1, 000 and BT are only ever loyal to each other and the idea of murder and assassinations. And they certainly don't bear any real allegiance to Aphra, maybe a passing bit of affection. In their retirement on the planet Birake, 000 and BT did enjoy themselves, but they missed their core functions as assassin droids. Funnily enough, during their brief retirement, they actually built sandcastles of figures and used this opportunity to still practice their assassin skills. But as you may have guessed, their retirement was short-lived. Agents of the Crimson Dawn sought these droids out, and though they were unsuccessful in capturing 000 and BT, they were met with disastrous results, notably their own murder and reinvigorating the assassin lifestyle of 000 and BT. With their retirement in a sense over, they eventually crossed paths again with Aphra's friends, notably Aphra's father, Corrin Aphra, and her former lover, Magna Tolvin. Corrin and friends sought the droids out because Aphra had become possessed by an entity known as the Spark Eternal. Now, being that 000 and BT were assets to Aphra, Aphra's friends and family thought they'd be able to help them again with the use of these droids. However, this didn't go quite as planned. Upon confronting the Spark and trying to free Aphra from her possession, they were actually struck by the Spark's power and turned into allies of the Spark against Aphra's companions. Just as their personalities are tumultuous, so is their story, right? After making a witty remark towards the Spark about how the AI itself was relegated to being trapped within a human body, the Spark lost patience and deactivated both 000 and BT. But not long after, they were reactivated to continue serving at the behest of the Spark that possessed Aphra. Their indentured servitude to the Spark would come to a swift conclusion though. The Spark, who was in control of Dr. Aphra, had their last stand on the Amaxine Station. You remember the space station that also housed the Drengir and was once visited during the High Republic and Old Republic? Though the story of the Spark, Vader, and their power struggle is better suited for another data disk drive, the droids are intertwined here, so just bear with me and hear this great story out. During the final stand by the Spark, while the droids are still in servitude to the Spark itself, they essentially lose along the Spark's last stand at the hands of Vader, Palpatine, and a whole host of other characters. But things get a little bit gray here because, to my knowledge, there's a tiny time jump here where the droids are not only freed of the Spark, but also Dr. Aphra, and alone once again. Both BT and 000 come across a group of droids seeking to exact revenge against Darth Vader, as they have all suffered at their hands. And funny enough, they quip about how many times they were sliced open by Vader and literally destroyed. Sentient droids are joined by the murderous duo eventually. However, it didn't take long for either droid to realize that the uprising they were taking part of was truly a fool's errand against Vader. Thus, they actually betrayed the Droid Uprising in the interest of self-preservation, managing to escape yet again. And I know this is hard to follow, but again, it's a tumultuous story and certainly a fun one to discuss. Now, while delving through the stories a little bit more, it's important to keep in mind that their personalities are also quite complex, but ultimately self-serving in a way that they thrive on chaos and their lust for death. In a way, they're a perfect parallel to Dr. Aphra, who also uses chaotic energy to sort her problems out. And while her methods don't necessarily involve killing people, the droids use this chaotic energy as it is essential to their core function. The droids' adventures continued during the period of the Great Scourge, a virus that was infecting droids and sought to take over the galaxy through a bunch of droids. The Scourge eventually touched BT and indoctrinated him. But being the odd assassin droid he was, 000 decided to go along on this pursuit of destruction too, even though he knew BT was possessed. So for more on this fun comic series run, definitely check out the Star Wars Dark Droids series. Fast forward, 000 would eventually be dismembered again by none other than IG-88, who captured and killed 000 to deliver on a bounty that had been put out for a homicidal droid. However, shortly after, 000 was eventually restored to his normal self, following a type of truce between IG-88 and others after a long dispute with the infected droids. And again, for the remainder of the story, you can check out the comic I mentioned before titled Star Wars Dark Droids for the conclusion of this series. Now, without spoiling the ending, 000 and BT are offered a safe haven, a place to remain among droids, but unsurprisingly, they both reject it, citing that essentially their mission is to continue living life as vicious, murderous assassins. So this wraps up part 2 of the data disk about BT and 000's story. In my opinion, they are two of the great new characters written by Kieran Gillen in the Disney Stars era, who was also the original author and creator of Dr. Aphra. Now I can't help but wonder where their story goes next. If they'll appear in another form of media like a show, or perhaps maybe they'll just continue their story in a new iteration of Dr. Aphra or another comic. And so it's time to temporarily close out this data file again. Guys, what do you think of BT and 000, and would you like to see more of them in new Star Wars content? Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and remember, the Force is with you, always.